responses to their questions by email, and printouts of these questions and the responses provided are available to the public. In order in which questions are received, I will ask each questionnaire if they have a supplementary question which the portfolio holder will try to answer. Since time may be an issue, we will take the response to their initial question as read and will proceed directly to each questionnaire to see if they have any supplementary questions.
Excuse me, I don't quite understand what you mean by as read.
If you want me to, I will get the questionnaire to actually read out his question. But we were trying to. I'll pass you over to.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. The intention is to try to get through all the questions and all the supplementaries in that hour if we can. We want to try and get everybody in. The idea is that each question is taken as being on the order sheet and the answer as on the order sheet, and therefore the Chairman will then invite that questioner, having in the knowledge of the question and the answer on the order sheet, to raise a supplementary which I will then answer orally. This will enable us hopefully to get through all of them. If you insist that you wish to read it out, that's fine, but it will take up time and means some people may not be able to get a chance to ask their question.
Excuse me, this came out at 1:30 this afternoon. Most people in this place actually work for a living. We got home at what, 5, 6 o'clock, and you've expected us to read this and come up with supplementary questions.
Yeah.
Can I suggest you postpone this for a week so we have a chance to read it?
Agreed. Here.
Yeah.
Can we, Chairman, can we, for members and the public, can we absolutely
Postpone it.
Can you be quiet, please? Thank you. The situation that we've got is the Council has a procedure which is public question time. It's 20 minutes. However, we have clearly more than 20 minutes worth of questions. The normal procedure is the question comes in, and on the night the portfolio holder or the chairman of a committee or the leader answers the question. So there's no pre-warning to the public of the answer. The questioner then gets the answer on the night and is invited to make a supplementary question if they so wish. You can imagine the circumstances are that means they've got no pre-warning of our answer and they've got to think in a few seconds of a supplementary. In this case, the portfolio holders have tried to be proactive. What they have done is issued their answers in advance. They're not obliged to do that, but they have done so to give everybody a chance not to have to think right at the last second, as would normally have happened. So if members want to read out their questions when they stand up, they can do, as in the public, but time is of the essence. The whole purpose behind here was to give some advance questioning and an advance notice to members. Of course, it's up to members whether you want to change the rules beyond that, having regard to where you are. But to me, what has happened is the portfolio holders have tried to be proactive, having regard to the number of questions.
This is too important for an hour.
So the question is, here we go. So, members and chairman,
Why are we
restricted
to 1 hour?
Who determines that?
Who wants to know why he's going to go an hour?
The Constitution states 20 minutes. Yes.
Well, you've extended it to an hour, so you can extend it to 2. Once you've gone beyond
The Constitution says 20 minutes. At my discretion, I have said that we will have a bit longer. I can also, at my discretion, turn it back to 20 minutes. So please play ball with us and be able get the answers that you want, because there won't be time.
We'll get them through another way.
I'm going to call for David Turvey to come in and ask him if he's got any supplementary questions.
Yes, I do.
Ask the same question. You'll have to come to mine first. Make them stand up
Is it working?
Yes.
As was said, we only got this at 1:30. It is quite complex. I have read it, and I have got some supplementary questions. I wouldn't say I've necessarily got all of my supplementary questions. So what I would say is, the absence of a supplementary on some of the answers is not necessarily an acceptance of what the answer is. But in the interest of brevity, I've cut down my supplementaries to be a subset of what I would normally ask. And I've got a number of them. The first one relates to A, background. The second clause of my question was what process has been followed to determine that Wessex did not have inappropriate relationships with or financial interests in housing developers. That really wasn't answered in the answer.
Well, in short, we've asked them who their clients are and whether they have any inappropriate relationships with developers active in this area at the moment, and they've replied to the negative.
Just to stop you there, you're allowed one supplementary question and you have asked it. So unless you've got
Madam Chairman, can I request your indulgence, since he's raised a number of questions of some detail, can I request that he's given a little bit of latitude, given that he's not accustomed to our procedures, to expand on his supplementary question.
I was also informed that I could ask more than one question.
Yes,
and therefore,
you can. But for each question that you have asked, you're allowed a supplementary.
Indeed.
If that makes that clearer.
Yep. I was clear already. My second supplementary question is about B, background on the content. I asked, how can the SHMA be a truly objective assessment of the housing need if the main consultees, being the developers and their representatives, have a vested interest in the outcome? Now, the answer is that you didn't really need to do the consultation and didn't really get to the root of the question that I asked. And I guess I'm concerned that an objective assessment of housing need becomes something different, perhaps more akin to a subjective housing investment target, if the only consultees are those who have got a vested interest in building more.
Okay. We are constrained very much by the NPPF and the guidance attached to it as to how we do a SHMA. As far as the consultation is concerned, what we were looking for are the kind of things that would tell us that we would be likely to fail at examination. That's what we were particularly looking for. And the people most likely to challenge that are the development industry. Having said that, the consultation was on our website and available to anybody to respond, and some did.
I'm still not sure that really answers the question. However, let's move on. My third supplementary relates to D, background, to ask what work and what evidence is the council producing to demonstrate the objectively assessed housing need is not deliverable. There is a get-out clause in the SHMA that says, regardless of what the SHMA says, you can go back to government and say this isn't deliverable. The answer you've given is that if they're SHLA sites, then it is de facto deliverable. However, I'd like to refer you to something the Prime Minister said, which is a quote from the Daily Telegraph in 2012. I care deeply about our countryside and environment. Our vision is one where we give communities much more say and much more control. The fear people have in villages is the great big housing estate being plonked down from above. Our reforms will make it easier for communities to say, we're not going to have a big plonk housing estate landing next to the village, but we would like 10, 20 or 30 extra houses and we'd like to build this way. Given that that's what the PM has said, that seems to me to be sufficient grounds for you to go back and say, well, actually, if we were to deliver this schma, we would go against our previous planning principles and concrete over much of the green lung at the heart of Hart, and that's not something we want to do as a council, nor do most of the public of the area.
Lots of politicians say lots of things that they would like to do. Very difficult to achieve in practice. We are obliged to comply with the law, with the NPPF, and with the guidance that's attached to it. And that doesn't give us that freedom. What the Prime Minister was referring to was neighbourhood planning, and the point of neighbourhood planning is to allow local communities to dictate how the development is delivered within the local plan. Sadly, we're not at the stage of having a local plan, and until we have one, neighbourhood planning is going to be very difficult. But that's something I was hoping to look forward to. As far as this is concerned, I may have missed some of the points of your question. If so, please remind me. The difficulty that we have with the whole of this issue is that it is not the requirement is placed on us by the NPPF to plan positively to meet objectively assessed needs, and that's something we have to do. If you're talking about constraints, and we are considering constraints, that applies after you have a plan that would otherwise achieve the objectively assessed needs. That's the process. That's one of the reasons why we got criticised at the examination in public, whatever it was, 15 months ago, that we were attempting to define our objectively assessed need in the light of the constraints, whereas what we're required to do is to do the objectively assessed need first, and once we've got that in place, we can then move on to say, but there are some constraints that limit our ability to do that. And one of the ones I would draw to your attention is the mitigation on the special protection area for birds. We have concerns that the mitigation that is received wisdom overall has its issues. We are looking at whether or not the issues that we perceive with that would be a potential limiting factor on the development we can build in Hart. Haven't got to the bottom of that yet, but even if we did, that comes right at the end of the process.
This is a statement rather than a question. But why would, given that you've got a level of urgency about getting a local plan that's agreed, why would you not start working in parallel on those activities which may give you a defence against delivering such a large amount of development? If you continue along a sequential route and not a parallel route, then all you do is extend the thing out.
We have and we are.
Now then, I had a series of questions about the way the schma was put together. A number of the answers that you gave were essentially appeals to authority and not really answering the question. But let's go through some of those. I mean, my central hypothesis is that on each and every parameter that can be used to define population growth, job growth, household size, all the drivers of housing, each and every time the person who only consulted the developers has come down on deciding what the parameters should be, which has the impact of increasing the amount of housing need. We can go through those. The first one is around the average household size. You've given an answer there saying it will be unsafe to assume that the recent patterns of household formation will continue into the future. The background to that is that all of the CLG projections predict that housing size will fall. Indeed, the government projection in 2008 for the period from 2001 to 2011 assumed a significant reduction in size, yet the actual data from the census shows that household sizes went up. Yet, through some sort of arbitrary means, you've decided that the prior projection of the household size going down will actually be you've decided that the actual data showing that the household size will go up will in fact change direction and go down, and said it's unsafe to do it the other way around. Now that seems completely absurd to me, when on the evidence the government projections are wrong.
When you have conflicting evidence, you have to make your best endeavour to ascertain what the true one is. And the difficulty you always have is that in any kind of statistical exercise, you're going to get as many views on it as there are days of the week. So you're always going to be in difficulty, and you're always going to have somebody who's going to be able to say, but I don't agree with the way you cut it. Now, we made the best estimate that we could, or rather our consultants did. They were independent of us. They made their best estimate of it. The other party, Cambridge University, have taken their own view of it independently again, and they feel it is valid. I'm in some difficulty in contradicting those experts.
Number 6, this relates to job growth. In part of the SHMA, it says that during the period from 1998 to 2008, the rate of job growth in the housing market area was 650 jobs per annum. I might remind you that that was a time of unprecedented economic growth. It was uninterrupted economic growth, and hindsight tells us that it was completely unsustainable. Yet, the base forecast that they use is 700 jobs per annum, additional over the next 20 years. No doubt we'll have recessions in that period. They then cite a report from Experian that says, well, it could be over 1,500 jobs per year, and then they settle on a midpoint between those two things of 1,130 jobs per year, which is almost double what we achieved in a period of unprecedented economic growth. It seems to me unreasonable that we should base an assumption on how many jobs we're going to create to be nearly double what we did in the period of unsustainable economic growth. I'm not satisfied with the answers that have been given either by Wessex or the answers that you've given here today.
I'm not sure there's a question there. I would tend to agree with you that the original estimate was completely bonkers, which is why it's been chopped in half. Is it still sustainable? Don't know. I guess we're going to find that out in due course. I seem to recall some years ago that the then Chancellor of the Exchequer informed us that he cancelled the boom and bust. It appears he didn't do so. I would tend to agree that it is difficult to see how that could be sustained. But the difficulty we have is that the experts, that everybody agrees with the experts, say that it's going to be a very large number of jobs. To cut it in half, could we get that past an inspector? Possibly. To cut it more, I doubt it, to be honest.
Can I just stop you there, please,
Yeah.
Mr. Kirby? You've had nearly at least 12 minutes.
Yeah.
And I would like to let other people have a question as well. Could I please invite you to come in and see one of our officers, David Hawes, and go through some of the others, because you're actually trying to go through what you don't think is right, which is, I can understand where you're coming from, but would you prefer to do that, and then they can go through it with you, because I would like other people to be able to speak.
I would, and if you let me finish, then instead of interrupting me, then we'll go a lot faster. We've got an hour. I've only got half an hour.
That's not being fair to the other people that have asked questions and want answers.
Right, but I've asked more than half the questions. I've got two more to go in one statement. The one is about the background, again on the changing demographics of the district. Over the next 20 years or so, we're going to have 14,000 extra people, of which 10,000 are going to be over 60, nearly 7,000 are going to be over 75. I asked the question of what evidence has the council collected to determine what types of location and what types of housing and what the appropriate location for that housing should be for the elderly and the infirm. The answer you've given is pretty weak, if I'm honest, and it looks like my inference from your answer is actually none. And I would, my contention would be, and therefore my question, is that a new town in Winchfield, I don't believe would be an appropriate response to that change in demographic, and building 4,000 houses or 5,000 houses in Winchfield will crowd out other development. So my question is, what work are you going to do to determine what is the appropriate housing structure and location to meet the needs of the elderly?
Part of the function of the housing market area reviews is to look at the housing mix. And part of that is whether we need more extra care accommodation, more sheltered accommodation, to suit the needs of the elder population. So that work does happen and does feed into all of this stuff. But you know, at the end of the day, we can only go on the evidence that we have. When you build a new community such as this, you will build it to accommodate all the people of the area, so you have a different mix of housing to accommodate all of that. It won't just all be identical ticky-tacky boxes. I would very much hope it wouldn't be at all ticky-tacky boxes, but we'll have to see how the planning process goes. In any event, you will be aware that the proposal within the plan period is that the proposed new settlement of Winchfield, if it goes ahead, is something like less than half of about half of the proposed housing over the course of the remainder of this current plan period. It doesn't include the 3,000 we've already built within the plan period, or permitted. So you know, we're talking about a third of the total plan period housing, and I would expect it to include accommodation for all of the variety of citizens that we have.
Can I just remind you, this is your last question. You're not allowed to have statements. It's got to be questions.
Okay. My last question was buried somewhere else where I asked what contact had the council and the councillors had with Barratt. The answer I've given is there was no formal meetings. That's not quite answered the question in that he hasn't said what informal meetings have happened. And it seems apparent from an email that was circulated today that at least one councillor has had some contact with the developer, because apparently she understands that that the option is running out imminently on some of the Winchfield sites, and the developer is very keen to get moving. If she's had no contact, then how did she know that?
Well, Chairman, I can't comment on what informal contacts other people have had that I don't know about. I have had no contact with the developer. I had contacts with a number of developers 2 or 3 years ago in company with officers, and the minutes of that is on the council's website. I believe it's still on the council's website. It certainly was at the time. I have had no contacts with any of the developers in the period that you named. I'm not aware that officers have got any record of any contacts, but in the scheme of things, officers will go to meetings of their professional associations and may well have contact informally with people there.
Thank you, Mr. Turvey. And I'll make sure that Daniel Hawes contacts you. Hi. Can I call Guy Yusha to come and speak, please, and ask his questions, supplementary questions?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'd be delighted to ask supplementary questions when my primary ones have been answered. Thank you.
We haven't been answered.
That's obviously a
Do you want to ask questions? Because you stood there and then...
Yes, I do, but my questions haven't actually been answered, so I'm waiting for the council to answer them so I can come back with supplementaries if I need to.
Chairman, all the questions have been addressed in the answers in the text. I'm not going to pick out anything extra. If you have a supplementary to ask on this by way of clarification of the answer you've had, if you feel that your question hasn't been properly answered, feel free to raise it.
Please could you look at page 11, questions 1 through to 4, and please tell me on that where my questions have been answered, please. I'm sorry, on page 12 there's somebody called Caroline Hoffman after me, and then there's a whole bunch of other people, so I'm trying to work out when my questions have been answered.
Chairman, we have aggregated a number of the questions together where there are similar issues raised in order to try and avoid duplication.
Okay, in that case, you haven't answered the question about the responses and the 78% of respondents that said they didn't want a new town. You haven't addressed the question about did Mr Hall take any notice of the advice he was given in August about not being specific about the Winchfield site. You haven't answered the question about have you approached any other local landowners to find out if their land was available. And I might add, this whole mess started because one of your councillors did approach landowners and ask them if their land was available, and with a representative of one of the builders. I think I've made my point.
As for the last one, the councillor in question is no longer a member of this council, and is no longer
Right, we'll move on to Tristram Carey, please. Caroline
On my question, I wanted to know that if land had been made available to allow more than one site for a potential new settlement, were there objective evaluation criteria that would have been used by the council to decide on the preferred site? Because it does seem to me that it's a massive decision where we're going to put a new settlement in Winchfield, and it seems to us that the decision has been made to put it in Winchfield without a real strategic assessment of the pros and cons of that site. And so my question is, if other sites were to be brought forward, do you have objective evaluation criteria and weightings that will allow us to arrive at a proper objective analysis of where the best place to put a new settlement would be?
Well, yes, Chairman, we would be more than happy to evaluate any site, sufficient sites that came forward.
No, are the evaluation criteria?
The evaluation criteria are being developed by officers. They will come before Cabinet, so they will be discussed in public before they are applied, so that you will be able to perceive that we have got.
How do you draw an objective list before you decide
we will
what's going to go in
more than happily make that available to anybody who wants it. And if there are more sites that come forward that would be appropriate, we'd be more than happy to measure them as well and take them on their merits.
Have you got another supplementary?
Yes, I do. My next supplementary is I just wanted to introduce the supplementary question by quoting from your answers on page 15. You say that the options paper was not a call for a vote or a referendum, and the council has also not weighted any responses. So it does make me wonder what the point of the evaluation consultation was. But my particular question is that when you put out the questionnaire for the responses to the options paper, you remove the greatest risk that in our mind is associated with a new development, and that is that if you have a new development whose whole capacity is not required in the current planning term, up to 2030 or whatever it is, then you've clearly got a lot more capacity, because you've created that new term, to grow the district much faster, because for a sustainable time you need something like 5,000 houses. So that creates a massive risk that our neighbouring districts will say, well, now you've got the capacity to build those houses, we'll ask you to take on all our capacity, and the population of Hart will grow massively. And I think if that risk had been made clear to the people who are responding to the questionnaire, almost nobody in Hart would have voted for a new settlement. And that, to me, biases the results very badly, and would require you to go back to the beginning.
That's a good question. The capacity as far as potentially accepting overflow from other districts is generated by the SHLA and not by allocations. It is open to any authority, lots of them do it, Aldershot 1 with their urban extension, to have a site that is bigger than is required for their plan period, but to only allocate a proportionate to this plan period, reckoning that the remainder would be in future plan periods. Because we all know that the one thing we can guarantee in all of this is that the government in 5 years, 10 years, 20 years' time is going to place a requirement on us to find housing. So just because you've got a site with partial allocation in this plan period doesn't mean that the rest of it's up for grabs. One of the reasons why we have put in a lesser amount than the entire site capability is that we don't believe that the developers can actually build at a faster rate. History shows that it takes a lot longer to get these things into place once you take master planning or that kind of stuff into account, and that when it actually starts to happen, the rate of build out tends to be limited by the number of marketing suites they've got. And in a relatively small location like this, it is going to be difficult for them to sustain more than 2 or 3 marketing suites.
I'm not allowed another supplementary on that one, am I? Okay, my last supplementary then is in my last question we talked about whether land had been brought, whether you asked the landowners to bring forward land, and you've already answered that question. But I wonder if it wouldn't actually be a better thing for Hart to have done an objective analysis of all the possible places where a new site could be developed using these criteria we were talking about, and saying, you know, if we could start with a clean sheet of paper, the best place to build a new settlement would be, you know, wherever it was, almost certainly not Winchfield, which has got lots of things against it. And if you then identified the site that you wanted, then if you went forward to the landowners and say, look, we've actually done an objective analysis, this is the best place, this is the best thing for Hart for the next 100 years to develop the thing in this way. And I suspect the landowners would then be prepared to come forward, because there wouldn't be the stigma attached to putting their land forward and getting vilified, you know, by the community, because it would have been an objective democratic process. So my supplementary question is, wouldn't that be a good thing to do?
It would be an interesting thing to do. The difficulty is that everywhere has constraints. There are only about 2 areas where I could conceive of it being theoretically possible. One of them is, frankly, not going to happen because the land is owned by a trust and the trustees have already declared they're not going to release it. They can't release it under the terms of their trust. The only other place is on the fringe of the North Downs, and I think you would have a lot of difficulty in building there without tripping over all the constraints of that. So at the end of the day, it comes down to land availability. Landowners, in my experience, tend not to be backwards in coming forwards if they think they can change the value of their land from agricultural to residential. They do tend to find it in their hearts to resist the blandishments of their neighbours to put it forward for consideration. And there is no land elsewhere that's come forward in sufficient quantities.
Thank you.
Can I call Henry Chandler, please?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. First of all, I'd like to just say I'm not against development. What I am keen on is ensuring we establish a solution that meets the quantitative needs appropriately, the qualitative and the appropriate, and actually match the needs of people in Hart as a priority. I've raised two questions, I think in conjunction with a response to a later question in the pack. I'd just like to ask one very simple question. On page 24, the response to an inquiry from Kirsty Carey responds in the second line with, Hart has more than enough identified SCLA sites that are required to accommodate Hart's objectively assessed needs. I realise the sentence continues. My question is, could I ask what level of coverage of that has been identified? In other words, as a percentage, are we talking 100% in excess, 200% or whatever? And specifically, what that percentage is without option 4 and with the consented schemes that are known in Hart currently, please.
Bear with me a moment, we've got things.
I'm quite happy to take a later response in writing if that would save time, because I realise there are a lot of other people who I'm sure have questions, and that's a matter of fact.
That's all right, we'll do that.
That'd be very helpful. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you. Can I call Andrew Renshaw, please?
If this is about compulsory purchase, you'll know that it comes very close to home. Are you aware that at the moment the new town idea is 100 acres short of a new settlement? Unless the representative of Barrett's, who is sitting in the back of the room, has inveigled any more people to put their land forward, as he tried to do in a phone call to me on August the 9th, that has been well reported in the Basingstoke Gazette of August the 14th and in the minutes of Winchfield